Auxiliaries to the Perception of Intelligible Natures by Porphyry, translated by Thomas Taylor. Section 1. 1. Every body is in place, but nothing essentially incorporeal or anything of this kind has any locality. 2. Things essentially incorporeal, because they are more excellent than all body and place, are everywhere, not with interval, but impartibly. 3. Things essentially incorporeal are not locally present with bodies, but are present with them when they please, by verging towards them, so far as they are naturally adapted so to verge. They are not, however, present with them locally, but through habitude, proximity, and alliance. 4. Things essentially incorporeal are not present with bodies by hypostasis and essence, for they are not mingled with bodies, but they impart a certain power which is proximate to bodies through verging towards them, for tendency constitutes a certain secondary power proximate to bodies. 5. Soul indeed is a certain medium between an impartible essence and an essence which is divisible about bodies, but intellect is an impartible essence alone, and qualities and material forms are divisible about bodies. 6. Not everything which acts on another affects that which it does affect by approximation and contact, but those natures which affect anything by approximation and contact use approximation accidentally. 7. The soul is bound to the body by a conversion to the corporeal passions, and again liberated by becoming impassive to the body. 8. That which nature binds, nature also dissolves, and that which the soul binds, the soul likewise dissolves. Nature indeed bound the body to the soul, but the soul binds herself to the body. Nature, therefore, liberates the body from the soul, but the soul liberates herself from the body. 9. Hence there is a twofold death, the one, indeed, universally known, in which the body is liberated from the soul, but the other, peculiar to philosophers, in which the soul is liberated from the body, nor does the one entirely follow the other. 10. We do not understand similarly all things, but in a manner adapted to the essence of each. For intellectual objects we understand intellectually, but those that pertain to the soul rationally. We apprehend plants spermatically, but bodies eidolically, i.e., as images, and that which is above all these super-intellectually and super-essentially. 11. Incorporeal hypostases in descending are distributed into parts, and multiplied about individuals with a diminution of power, but when they ascend by their energies beyond bodies, they become united and proceed into a simultaneous subsistence through exuberance of power. 12. The homonominous is not in bodies only, but life is also among the number of things which have a multifarious subsistence. For the life of a plant is different from that of an animated being, the life of an intellectual essence differs from that of the nature which is beyond intellect, and the psychical differs from the intellectual life. For these natures live, though nothing which proceeds from them possesses a life similar to them. 13. Everything which generates by its very essence generates that which is inferior to itself, and everything generated is naturally converted to its generator. Of generating natures, however, some are not all converted to the beings which they generate, but others are partly converted to them and partly not, and others are only converted to their progeny, but are not converted to themselves. 14. Everything generated possesses from that which is different from itself the cause of its generation, since nothing is produced without a cause. Such generated natures, however, as have their existence through composition, these are on this account corruptible, but such as, being simple and incomposite, possess their existence in a simplicity of hypostasis, these being indissoluble, are indeed incorruptible. Yet they are said to be generated, not as if they were composites, but as being suspended from a certain cause. Bodies, therefore, are in a twofold respect generated, as being suspended from a certain producing cause, and as being composites. But soul and intellect are generated as being suspended from a cause, and not as composites. Hence, bodies are generated, dissoluble, and corruptible, but soul and intellect are unbegotten, as being without composition, and on this account indissoluble and incorruptible. Yet they are generated so far as they are suspended from a cause. 15. Intellect is not the principle of all things, for intellect is many things, but prior to the many, it is necessary that there should be the one. It is evident, however, that intellect is many things, for it always understands its conceptions, which are not one, but many, and which are not anything else but itself. If, therefore, it is the same with its conceptions, but they are many, intellect also will be many things. But that it is the same with its intelligibles, or objects of its intellection, may be thus demonstrated. For if there is anything which intellect surveys, it will either survey this thing as contained in itself, or as placed in something else, and that intellect indeed contemplates or surveys is evident. For in conjunction with intellection or intellectual perception, it will be intellect, but if you deprive it of intellection, you will destroy its essence. It is necessarily, therefore, that directing our attention to the properties of knowledge, we should investigate the perception of intellect. All Gnostic powers, then, which we contain, are universally sense, imagination, and intellect. The power, however, which employs sense, surveys by projecting itself to externals, not being united to the objects which it surveys, but only receiving an impression of them by exerting its energies upon them. When, therefore, the eye sees a visible object, it is impossible that it should become the same with that which it perceives, for it would not see if there was not an interval between it and the object of its perception. And after the same manner, that which is touched, if it was the same with that by which it was touched, would perish. From which it is evident that sense, and that which employs sense, must always tend to an external object, in order to apprehend something sensible. In like manner also, the fantasy or imagination always tends to something external, and by this extension of itself gives subsistence to or prepares an image, its extension to what is external, indicating that the object of its perception is a resemblance of something external. And such, indeed, is the apprehension of these two powers, neither of which, verging to and being collected into itself, perceives either a sensible or insensible form. In intellect, however, the apprehension of its objects does not subsist after this manner, but is effected by converging to and surveying itself. For by departing from itself, in order to survey its own energies and become the eye of them, and the sight of essences, it will not understand anything. Hence, as sense is to that which is sensible, so is intellect to that which is intelligible. Sense, however, by extending itself to externals, finds that which is sensible situated in matter. But intellect surveys the intelligible by being collected into itself and not extended outwardly. On this account, some are of the opinion that the hypostasis of intellect differs from that of fantasy only in name. For fantasy in the rational animal appeared to them to be intelligence. As these men, however, suspended all things from manner and a corporeal nature, it follows that they should suspend from these intellect. But our intellect surveys both bodies and other essences, hence it apprehends them situated somewhere. But as the proper objects of intellect have a subsistence out of matter, they are nowhere locally. It is evident, therefore, that intellectual natures are to be conjoined with intelligence. But if intellectual natures are in intellect, it follows that intellect, when it understands intelligibles, surveys both the intelligible and itself, and that proceeding into itself, it perceives intellectually, because it proceeds to intelligibles. If, however, intellect understands many things, and not one thing only, intellect will necessarily be many, but the one subsists prior to the many, so that it is necessary that the one should be prior to intellect. 16. Memory is not the conservation of imaginations, but the power of calling forth de novo those conceptions which had previously occupied the attention of the mind. 17. Soul indeed contains the reasons or forms of all things, but energizes according to them, either being called forth to this energy by something else, or converting itself to them inwardly. And when called forth by something else, it introduces, as it were, the senses to externals, but when it enters into itself, it becomes occupied with intellectual conceptions. Hence, someone may say that neither the senses nor intellectual perceptions are without the fantasy, so that, as in the animal, the senses are not without the passive affection of the sensitive organs, in like manner intellections are not without the fantasy. Perhaps, however, it may be said in answer to this, that as an impression in the sensitive organ is the concomitant of the sensitive animal, so analogously a phantasm is the concomitant of the intellection of the soul in man, considered as an animal. 18. Soul is an essence without magnitude, immaterial, incorruptible, possessing its existence in life, and having life from itself. 19. The passivity of bodies is different from that of incorporeal natures. For the passivity of bodies is attended with mutation, but the adaptations and passions of the soul are energies, yet they are by no means similar to the calefactions and frigifactions of bodies. Hence, if the passivity of bodies is accompanied by mutation, it must be said that all incorporeal natures are impassive. For the essences which are separated from matter and bodies are what they are in energy, but those things which approximate to matter and bodies are themselves indeed impassive, but the natures in which they are surveyed are passive. For when the animal perceives sensibly, the soul, i.e., the rational soul, appears to be a separate harmony of itself, moving the chords adapted to harmony. But the body is similar to the inseparable harmony of the chords, i.e., the harmony which cannot exist separate from the chords. But the animal is the cause of the motion because it is the animated being. It is, however, analogous to a musician because it is harmonic, but the bodies which are being struck through sensitive passion are analogous to the harmonized chords of a musical instrument. For in this instance also, separate harmony is not passively affected, but the chords. And the musician indeed moves according to the harmony which is in him. Yet the chords would not be musically moved, even though the musician wished that they should, unless the harmony ordered this to take place. 20. Incorporeal natures are not denominated like bodies, according to a participation in common of one and the same genus, but they derive their appellation from a mere privation with respect to bodies. Hence, nothing hinders some of them from having a subsistence as beings, but others as non-beings, some of them from being prior to, and others posterior to bodies, some from being separate, and others inseparable from bodies, some from having a subsistence by themselves, but others from being indigent of things different from themselves to their existence, some from being the same through energies and self-motive lives, but others subsisting together with lives and energies of a certain quality. For they subsist according to a negation of things which they are not, and not according to the affirmation of things which they are. 21. The properties of matter, according to the ancients, are the following. It is incorporeal, for it is different from bodies. It is without life, for it is neither intellect nor soul, nor vital from itself, i.e., essentially. It is formless, variable, infinite, and powerless. Hence, it is neither being nor yet non-being. That is, it is not non-being like motion, but it is true non-being, the image and phantasm of bulk, because it is that which bulk primarily contains. It is likewise powerless, and the desire of subsistence has stability but not permanency, and always appears in itself to be contrary. Hence, it is both small and great, more and less, deficient and exceeding. It is always becoming to be, or rising into existence, abides not, yet is unable to fly away, and is the defect of all being. Hence, whatever it announces itself to be, it deceives, and though it should appear to be great, it is nevertheless small, for it resembles a flying mockery, eluding all pursuit and vanishing into non-entity. For its flight is not in place, but is affected by its desertion of real being. Hence, also, the images which are in it are in an image more unreal than themselves, just as in a mirror, where the thing represented is in one place and the representation of it is in another, it likewise appears to be full, yet contains nothing, though it seems to possess all things. 22. All passions subsist about the same thing as that about which corruption subsists. For the reception of passions is the path to corruption, and the thing that is subject of passivity is also the subject of corruption. Nothing incorporeal, however, is corrupted, but some of them either exist or do not exist, so that they are not at all passive. For that which is passive ought not to be a thing of this kind, but such as may be changed in quality and corrupted by properties of things that enter into it and cause it to be passive. For the change in quality of that which is inherent is not causally affected. Neither, therefore, does matter suffer, for it is of itself without quality. Nor do the forms which enter into it and depart from it suffer, but the passion subsists about the composite from matter and form, the very being of which consists in the union of the two. For this, in the contrary powers and qualities of things which enter and produce passion, is seen the subject of them. On which account also those things, the life of which is externally derived and does not subsist from themselves, are capable of suffering both from the participation and privation of life. But those beings whose existence consists of an impassive life must necessarily possess a permanent life, just as the privation of life, so far as it is a privation of it, is attended with impassivity. As, therefore, to be changed and to suffer pertain to the composite from matter and form, and this is body, but matter is exempt from this, thus also to live and die, and to suffer through the participation of life and death, is beheld in the composite from the soul and body. Nevertheless, this does not happen to the soul, because it is not a thing which consists of life and the privation of life, but consists of life alone, and it possesses this because its essence is simple, and the reason or form of the soul is self-motive. 23. An intellectual essence is so similar in its parts that the same things exist in both a partial and an all-perfect intellect. In a universal intellect, however, partial natures subsist universally, but in a partial intellect, both universals and particulars subsist partially. 24. Of that essence, the existence of which is in life, and the passions of which are lives, the death also consists of a certain life. and not in a total privation of life, because neither is the deprivation of life in this essence a passion or a path which entirely leads to a non-vital subsistence. 25. In incorporeal lives, the progressions are effected while the lives themselves remain firm and stable, nothing pertaining to them being corrupted or changed to a hypostasis of things subordinate to them. Hence, neither are the things to which they give subsistence produced with a certain corruption or mutation, nor do these incorporeal lives subsist like generation, which participates of corruption and mutation. Hence, they are unbegotten and incorruptible, and on this account are unfolded into light without generation and incorruptibly. 26. Of that nature which is beyond intellect, many things are asserted through intellection, but it is surveyed by a cessation of intellectual energy better than with it. Just as respect to one who is asleep, many things are asserted of him while he's in that state by those who are awake, but the proper knowledge and apprehension of his dormant condition is only to be obtained through sleep. For the similar is known by the similar, because all knowledge is an assimilation to the object of knowledge. 27. With respect to that which is non-being, we either produce it, being ourselves separated from real being, or we have a preconception of it, as adhering to being. Hence, if we are separated from being, we have not an antecedent conception of non-being, which is above being, but our knowledge in this case is only a false passion, such as that which happens to man when he departs from himself. For as a man may himself, and through himself, be truly elevated to the non-being which is above being, so by departing from being he is led to the non-being which is falling off from being. 28. The hypostasis of body is no impediment whatever to that which is essentially incorporeal, so as to prevent it from being where and in such way as it wishes to be. For as that which is without bulk is incomprehensible by body, and does not at all pertain to it, so that which has bulk cannot impede or obscure an incorporeal nature, but lies before it like a non-entity. Nor does that which is incorporeal pervade locally when it wishes to pass from one thing to another, for place is consubsistent with bulk. Nor is it compressed by bodies, for that which in any way whatsoever is connected with bulk may be compressed and effect transition locally, but that which is entirely without bulk and without magnitude cannot be restrained by that which has bulk, and does not participate in local motion. Hence, by a certain disposition, it is found to be there where it is inclined to be, being with respect to place everywhere and yet nowhere. By a certain disposition, therefore, it is either above the heavens or is contained in a certain part of the world. When, however, it is contained in a certain part of the world, it is not visible to the eyes, but the presence of it becomes manifest from its works. 29. It is necessary that an incorporeal nature, if it is contained in body, should not be enclosed in it like a wild beast in a den. For no body is able thus to enclose and comprehend it, nor is it contained in body in the same way as a bladder contains something liquid or wind. But it is requisite that it should give subsistence to certain powers which verge to what is external, through its union with body, by which powers, when it descends, it becomes complicated with body. Its conjunction, therefore, with body is effected through an ineffable extension. Hence, nothing else binds it, but itself binds itself to body. Neither, therefore, is it liberated from body when body is mortally wounded and corrupted, but it liberates itself by turning itself from an adhering affection to the body. "30. None of the hypostases which rank as wholes and are perfect are converted to their own progeny, but all perfect hypostases are elevated to their generators as far as to the mundane body, or the body of the world. For this body, being perfect, is elevated to its soul, which is intellectual, and on this account it is moved in a circle. But the soul of this body is elevated to intellect, and intellect to the first principle of all things. All beings, therefore, proceed to this principle as much as possible, beginning from the last of things. The elevation, however, to that which is first is either proximate or remote. Hence, these natures may not only be said to aspire after the highest God, but also enjoy him to the utmost of their power. But in partial hypostases, and in those which are able to verge to many things, there is also a desire of being converted to their progeny. Hence, likewise, in these there is error. In these there is reprehensible incredulity. These, therefore, matter injures, because they are capable of being converted to it, being at the same time able to be converted to divinity. Hence, perfection gives subsistence to secondary from primary natures, preserving them converted to the first of things. But imperfection converts primary to posterior natures, and causes them to love the beings which have departed from divinity prior to themselves. 31. God is everywhere because he is nowhere, and this is also true of intellect and soul, for each of these is everywhere because each is nowhere. But God indeed is everywhere and nowhere with respect to all things which are posterior to him, and he alone is such as he is, and such as he wills himself to be. Intellect is in God, but everywhere and nowhere with respect to natures posterior to it, and soul is in God and intellect, and everywhere and nowhere with respect to body. But body is in soul, and in intellect, and in God. And as all beings and non-beings are from and in God, hence he is neither beings nor non-beings, nor subsists in them. For if indeed he was alone everywhere, he would be all things and in all. But since he is also nowhere, all things are produced through him and contained in him, because he is everywhere. They are, however, different from him because he is nowhere. Thus, likewise, intellect, being everywhere and nowhere, is the cause of souls, and the natures posterior to souls. Yet intellect is not soul, nor the natures posterior to soul, nor subsists in them, because it is not only everywhere, but is also nowhere, with respect to the natures posterior to it. And soul is neither body nor in body, but is the cause of body, because being everywhere, it is also nowhere with respect to body. And this progression of things in the universe extends as far as that which is neither able to be at once everywhere nor at once nowhere, but partially participates of each of these. 32. The soul does not exist on earth when it is conversant with terrene natures, in the same manner as bodies accede to the earth, but a subsistence of the soul on the earth signifies its presiding over terrene bodies. Thus also the soul is said to be in Hades when it precedes over its image, which is naturally adapted to be in place, but possesses its hypostasis in darkness. So that if Hades is a subterranean, dark place, the soul, though not divulged from being, will exist in Hades by attracting itself to its image. For when the soul departs from the solid body, the spirit accompanies it, which had been collected from the starry spheres. But as from its adhering affection to the body, it exerts a partial reason, through which it possesses a habitude to a body of a certain quality in performing the energies of life. Hence, from its adhesion to body, the form of the fantasy is impressed in the spirit, and thus the image is attracted by the soul. The soul, however, is said to be in Hades, because the spirit obtains a formless and obscure nature, and as a heavy and moist spirit pervades as far as to subterranean places, hence the soul is said to proceed under the earth. Not that this essence of the soul changes one place for another and subsists in place, but it receives the habitudes of bodies which are naturally adapted to change their places, and to be allotted a subsistence in place, such like bodies receiving it according to aptitudes from being disposed after a certain manner towards it. For the soul, conformably to the manner in which it is disposed, finds an appropriate body. Hence, when it is disposed in a purer manner, it has a connascent body which approximates to an ethereal nature, and this is an ethereal body. But when it proceeds from reason to energies of fantasy, then its connascent body is of a solar form nature, and when it becomes effeminate and vehemently excited by the corporeal form, then it is connected with a lunar form body. When, however, it falls into bodies which consist of humid vapors, then a perfect ignorance of real being follows, together with darkness and infancy. Moreover, in its egress from the body, if it still possesses a spirit turbid from humid exhalations, it then attracts to itself a shadow and becomes heavy, a spirit of this kind naturally striving to penetrate into the recesses of the earth, unless a certain other cause draws it in a contrary direction. As, therefore, the soul, when surrounded with this testaceous and terrene vestment, necessarily lives on the earth, so likewise, when it attracts a moist spirit, it is necessarily surrounded with the image. But it attracts moisture when it continually endeavors to associate with nature, whose operations are effected in moisture, and which are rather under than upon the earth. When, however, the soul earnestly endeavors to depart from nature, then she becomes a dry splendor, without a shadow and without a cloud or mist. More moisture gives subsistence to mist in the air, but dryness constitutes a dry splendor from exhalation. 33. The things which are truly predicated of a sensible and material nature are these: that it has in every respect a diffused and dispersed subsistence, that it is mutable, that it has existence in difference, that it is a composite, that it subsists by itself as the subject or recipient of other things, that is beheld in place and in bulk, and other properties similar to these are asserted of it. But the following particulars are predicated of a truly existing being, and which itself subsists from itself, viz., that it is always established in itself, that it is an existence perpetually similar and the same, that it is essentialized in sameness, that it is immutable according to essence, is uncompounded, is neither dissoluble nor in place, nor dispersed into bulk, and is neither generated nor capable of being destroyed, and other properties are asserted of it similar to these, to which predications adhering, we should neither ourselves assert anything repugnant to them concerning the different nature of sensible and truly existing beings, nor assent to those who do.